Broadcasting live and worldwide. Here's Brodie Brazil.
All right, everybody. Thanks for checking out this episode of the podcast. First of 2019. Welcome to the new year. It's part of a series that I promised you a while back. 2 episodes looking back at the 2018 that was for the San Jose Sharks and the Oakland A's. And now here in 2019, first I'll tackle the Sharks, so look ahead towards the calendar year 2019 as well. Be on the lookout for an episode of 2019 for the Oakland A's. But since we are right smack dab in the middle of the hockey season, in fact, right past the halfway point, I want to begin here this episode with the Sharks and a couple different main topics that I'm looking forward to in the calendar year of 2019. I mean, I guess I didn't realize this until I started to make notes for this episode. It's going to be a relatively busy 2019 for this hockey franchise. A lot of things up in the air, a lot of things to be sorted out. Again, I'm not here to tell you exactly how it's going to be, but I can definitely give you some insights into how I see things shaping up and what are going to be some of the biggest topics surrounding this hockey franchise, really from top to bottom as we get through 2019. It's going to be interesting to sit back and listen to this podcast in, say, December of 2019 and go back on all the questions and what we have had answered, what we will have had answered by then. Let me begin first here. Number one, the most obvious thing to me about 2019 is how is a postseason run going to shape up for these Sharks? Now, it's going to be the second half of the 18-19 campaign, the one we're currently in right now. I'm not sure that you can read anything into this regular season so far that dictates how a postseason run is going to be for the Sharks. Let's be honest, first off, this is how the Sharks are graded by fans on a season-to-season basis. How did the playoffs go? But I'm not sure that there's a whole lot we can read into right now about this Sharks regular season and what it translates into a postseason run. And I think we can all speak on the experience of a couple years back when the Sharks went to the Stanley Cup Final. Think about that regular season. At about the Christmas point, they were barely a 500 team. And out of all things, the opponent they met in the Stanley Cup Final, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they were less than a 500 team at the Christmas break of that respective season. So again, I'm not sure how much we can know about the playoffs right now. Way too early to start discussing that. Too many things are going to happen from now till then. You know, hey, good hopefully and some bad. Just comes with the nature of a hockey season. But I think the one thing you can assess and address about this season that we're in right now, the regular season, the second half statistically is bound to be better than the first half. I say that for a couple reasons with the regular season. A lot of the heavy lifting has already been done with the schedule in terms of back-to-backs, East Coast travel, and just getting all of that out of the way. The second half of this regular season, the part that's going to take place in 2019, should on paper be more manageable for this hockey team. They're also going to get more practices at home, which are oh so valuable. So I suppose it goes like this. They're a contender in the Pacific Division right now. They're in the mix of one of the top couple teams, and they haven't even played their best yet. So I think looking forward, they're positioned well. And on paper, you'd like to hope that the results are more consistent and more predictable from this team as the second half of this season and obviously 2019 rolls around. So again, topic number one as I close it out, what do the playoffs look like? Hard to know, but assessing this regular season, they're not in a bad spot right now, and you'd have to think that everything is still quite on track for a deep postseason run in 2019. So hopefully the spring brings us that. Number two on my topics of discussion here, it's a big one. It's the future of Erik Karlsson in San Jose. Now, we may know more about this in relative weeks ahead instead of months ahead. It's the month of February when Carlson could sign an 8-year contract extension in San Jose. Couldn't do it before then. That's the way the rules shake out. And a lot of people are figuring that the reason he hasn't signed any type of extension to this point is to at least allow the flexibility of that longest duration of contract he could get, 8 years. again sometime later in the month of February. So going back to just acquiring Carlson and the trade Doug Wilson made the day before training camps opened, I mean, he was actually in Ottawa to seal the deal with not only the Senators, but also to smooth things over with Erik Karlsson. Again, as I tape this right now, this is Erik Karlsson on an 11-game point streak. This is Erik Karlsson who has definitely found a form, if not all of his game right now. He's found his stride with the Sharks. That is definitely something he did not have when this season started. And I think at some point during this year, he's going to really open up about that and open up about how tough it was to want to make that first great impression, not be able to do that, to stick with it. I mean, the character that he has shown this entire time and getting things right, seemingly getting things right at this point, I think says a lot about him. And again, going back to the acquisition of Carlson, I don't think the Sharks make the trip all the way out there if there is not some discussion of, hey, we want to trade for you, but we also want to make sure that we are at least in the mix for your long-term future plans. What I'm saying here is that this is not the first time Doug Wilson and Erik Karlsson are going to get together and talk about the longest of possible extensions. So I think as much as, they will be signing a new deal together, this is not the first time they will have talked about it. My gut leads me to believe that Carlson has enjoyed his experience so far. Again, this is me speaking for him, okay, which I generally don't like to do. I don't think it's always the most accurate thing to do, but from all observations, San Jose is a great hockey market to play in. Players love playing here. They want to come play here on a winning team in a place like Northern California, which is fantastic to call home. We also know that Carlson has great connections back still to Ottawa. He loves Ottawa. He's called that his forever home. But if he's not going to be there, I mean, this is not a bad place to be either. And I'm talking about in terms of the team, and I'm also talking about terms of the lifestyle here in Northern California. So the future of Erik Karlsson, a huge thing to be sorted out in 2019. He will become a free agent if nothing happens between him and the Sharks by midsummer. But if you ask me, I think it's highly likely that number 65 is around here for the long term. There's just too many things that lead me to believe that he's settling in here, that he's going to enjoy this. And it wasn't perfect at first. And this was his first time changing NHL teams. And that was a big transition. But when the dust settles, I think 2019 is going to bring us a contract extension. Again, that's my prediction. We'll see if I'm right. Another big thing here is the future of Joe Pavelski with the San Jose Sharks, something we won't know about, or we haven't known about yet until this calendar year of 2019, because Pavelski, just like Carlson, is set to become a free agent this summer if no extension happens before then. First off, let's talk about Pavelski's season. And most everybody is comparing it to what he went through last year with the broken hand and switching positions midway through from winger to center when Joe Thornton got hurt. I mean, you cannot really compare what he was able to do last season to what he's doing this season, already surpassing his entire goal total of last year and just looking and playing the part. Having a career season in this contract season is Joe Pavelski. But 2019 is going to bring us the answer of, does he stay? Now, the thing about this is Joe Pavelski is not a player with age that I think is getting worse. Age is not as much of a factor for number 8. In fact, I think he's getting better with age, if that's a possibility. And yes, age is going to get everybody in the end, but you look at Pavelski's game, it's not necessarily built on physical attributes of size or strength. He's out there making the smartest hockey plays, him in front of the net with the hand-eye coordination. I mean, that doesn't age as much as other physical traits tend to do in the National Hockey League. So in terms of Pavelski as a player and as a captain, do you want him back? I mean, of course, at this point. Or you'd be foolish to suggest that the Sharks would want to go in a different direction. But it is a business. How does all of this shake out? Who else would want to be a suitor of Joe Pavelski? I think a lot of teams out there would be. How can Pavelski fit into the salary structure of the San Jose Sharks. There's been recent other huge deals. Obviously, if you're Joe, you want to fit in with something comparable, right? You don't want to have to take this huge discount just because everybody else got in first. So there's a lot going on there, and 2019 is going to see whether how and whether Pavelski comes back. Again, I hate to go into too many predictions here, but I would have to think that both sides, Joe and the Sharks, want to make this work, and I think they're going to find a way to make this work. And I think, and not to connect players too, because I hate putting it this way, but I think the Carlson stuff has to fall into place before the Pavelski stuff does. Not that there's a priority there. It's just that one is going to lead to the other in terms of getting the money straight, the money settled out first. All right, if the Sharks know what they have in Carlson, and then they're going to know what they can do with Pavelski to hopefully suit his needs as desired. And it's going to bring me right into point number 4 here. The future of Joe Thornton. I feel like there's a trend here. I'm talking about 2019. It's all about the future of individual players. I'll break away from that in just a second, but let me get to point number 4 here. The future of Joe Thornton. Here's a player that has seemed to find himself all over again with the second major knee injury and surgery. He has recovered from that, and he's in a different role now. He's a third-line center. He's with Marcus Sorensen, but you know what? Still very impactful, maybe playing a couple less minutes a night, sure. But when he's out there, I think he's definitely been a difference maker, and in some certain games this season, he's been the best Sharks forward out there. So, the future of Joe Thornton. Let me throw out a potential to you here. Let's say the Sharks win the Stanley Cup. Look at Joe and his situation. Look at Joe at his age. Do you call it a career right there? Is it going to get any better than that? I mean, do you try and go for another one? And this is, I guess it's weird. Like, this is a best case, yet worst case scenario, because it puts Joe in one heck of a position. Like, what do you do? If he wins the Stanley Cup this year with the Sharks, does he come back for more? So let me throw that out there as a potential option. But there's obviously other options should the Sharks not get to that point. What does Joe do? I think certainly is the desire to play as many seasons there. Absolutely. That's not in question, I don't think, for me, for him, for anybody. But I think the real thing he'll need to do is assess the body at the end of this regular season. Assess it for a couple different reasons. Where's he at? How much more can he do of this? I think the team's going to have to be honest with him. What type of role do they see from him? What does he think is a good role? He'll want any part of contributing that he can. Like, you might have to kick him off this team. Like, he loves this so much, and I'm kidding about that. That would be the dumbest thing ever. But he wants to be a part of this. You can tell deep down so much. So it's really the question of roles, and part of that goes to roles and salary, and maybe. And I'm not the one to figure out salary cap stuff here, but maybe the little bit that Thornton is taking less is the little bit more that Pavelski needs on a year-to-year basis to get a new contract deal. So look, there are much smarter people out there working on this, much smarter people than me. I'm talking about Doug Wilson and the front office, how they can get all this settled away. But the future of Carlson, talking about Erik, Pavelski, and the other Joe Thornton. Those are 3 major things that we're going to find out in 2019. And I guess you're probably realizing here that I've said, they're all going to stay. Carlson's going to re-sign. Pavelski's going to re-sign. And Joe Thornton, assuming, most situations, Joe Thornton's also going to be back for 2019, 2020, that season, next season. I guess I am saying that I think they're going to find a way to get everybody back. That's the gut. And the desire's there, and the stats are there, and the leadership's there. Everything is like, there's no obvious reasons why all this stuff can't work out. The only thing that it comes down to, beyond players wanting to be around and the team wanting the players, is money. And I realize that's a big issue. But again, only a handful of people really know about those negotiations. I'm not one of those inside the tiny little circle people. Neither are you if you're watching this, unless you are Doug Wilson, Joe Pavelski, Joe Thornton, or Erik Karlsson. By the way, I said watching this. It's also a YouTube video as well as this podcast. So again, the future of those three guys. Let's get to number 5 here. There's a grand total of 6. The young players of 2019. I'm talking about Timo Meier, Marcus Sorensen, Radim Šimek, Lukas Radil, and a couple others. How do they take the next steps of their career? It's so easy to isolate and focus in on Timo Meier because statistically, he's ahead of everybody else. If it's goal total, if it's maybe just even the role he plays, you look at the lineup, typically a top 6 forward, a pretty regular guy at that position. But it's so important that all these players take the next steps. And they're going to be small steps, but consistency and knowing what to expect. And I talked to Pete DeBoer actually earlier today about these young players and their roles. And he said it was so important for all these young players to know that, the Sharks are not designed to be a super top-heavy team. Yes, they have a veteran presence that's very established, but for the Sharks to win hockey games regularly, they obviously need all 4 lines. And they need this youngest group of players contributing on a pretty regular basis. So 2019, the biggest question mark and really topic, it's not so much a question mark, I'm interested to see how it pans out, is the youngest group of players, what type of steps can they make? And I am talking about the calendar year here. I am talking about this second half of 2018/19, and I'm also talking about the beginning half of next season already. It's part of 2019, but how will these players transition from, okay, it's their first or second full NHL season to, okay, we can rely on these guys. They came up, they were drafted, they came up through the system the right way. They are ready. There's no question. These are full-time NHL players. We know what their role is going to be, and we know best how to use them. Just going back to Timo Meier for a second, he eclipsed the 20-goal mark last season in playing almost all the games. And this year, it's definitely not out of the question that he could get to 35 and flirt with 40 goals maybe. That's a heck of a big step forward for Timo. And I don't want to sit here and put all the pressure on, okay, get to a certain amount. I'd rather do the eye test with Timo and all the other young players. But if he could get to that milestone of around 35, in the conversation of 35, that is a heck of a season for Timo time. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing what. Let's use Radim Šimek's name as well too. A physical defenseman, something the Sharks didn't really have a quantity of before that. I know Dylan obviously can play that type of game as well, but the mark that Šimek has made to me has been impressive, and I think I'm looking for more of the eye test, especially him as a defenseman. What else is he going to bring, or how much of that can he bring to the table in the rest of 2019, this season into the next season, 19/20. All right, last topic here, and I think this is potentially the biggest one from a team aspect of the Sharks right now. We saw in the first half of this season, which was the 2018 portion, we saw a Sharks group that got away from itself defensively. So my biggest question about 2019, and yes, specifically this regular season, this second half, does defense become a strong point of this group again, like it was last time around? You look at where the Sharks are at in the standings right now. There's at least 5 games, at least, I think, where they scored enough goals, they played a good enough offensive game, but team defense, and people are going to point the finger here at goaltending. I'm not sure that's completely fair. Team defense let them down, let's say at least 5 times. That's 10 points. Add 10 points to where the Sharks have consistently been in the standings, and they are out ahead of the Pacific Division by a nice margin. My point is, team defense has been the main story this year, not just hurting them there in the standings, but also team defense sometimes leading to more offensive chances. That is such the root, the structure, the backbone, the foundation. How many more other words can I come up with here? You understand the importance team defense is to the Sharks, the way they're designed, the way Pete DeBoer coaches, and the success they've had before as a group. It all centers around sound defensive play. They haven't been consistent with their team defense, and because of that, look at the goalies' stats. They're not as high of a watermark as they've ever been before. And so yeah, some of the blame goes there. My point is, if this team in 2019 can get back to being as defensively capable as they've been before, watch out. And it goes back to that first point I made about what does this playoff run of 2019 bring? A large part of that is going to be just team defense. Can this group get it together so they're not allowing so many odd man chances, so that opponents aren't getting as many grade A net front chances as we've seen this season, and also so that the Sharks can get a lead on an opponent and put that team away through the course of 60 minutes with team defense. One of the other things that came out in my conversation with Pete DeBoer is how a lot of teams in the NHL this day and age are able to make comebacks. They allow their defense to kind of take more risks and jump in offensively on the rush, essentially gambling a bit more. Opponents are going to do that. But if your defense is strong enough to counter that, to prevent that, you're going to take that 2-goal lead that you built in the first period and never look back on a given nightly basis. So again, those are my big points for the Sharks here in 2019. I look ahead as I was doing these notes again, and I really feel like there is so much to be sorted out here in this calendar year. And I guess you could say that about a lot of different years, right? If we looked at different calendar years and all that happened for this team or any professional sports team, yeah, I guess a lot does occur. A lot of things you never could have expected occurred in the calendar year. Let's go back to January 1st, 2018. Were we talking about Evander Kane and Erik Karlsson being part of the Sharks? Absolutely not. We were just fresh on discussing what this group was like without Patrick Marleau. So it feels now like a long time ago. A lot happens in a calendar year. I can't wait to see what happens in the rest of 2019 for Team Teal. Hey, that's it for this episode of the podcast. Quick reminder, I would love to interact with you on all platforms, including right here on YouTube. Yes, some of you are watching this in the video form. Subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate that. I'm also working super hard on Instagram, and I'm always around during game activities on Twitter. So find me there. Again, appreciate you watching. And until next time, I'm Brodie Brazil. And yes, that is my real name.